Welcome to the Inland Valley Storytellers monthly story swap meeting. My name is John St. Clair, and I am the leader of this group, and I am your Zoom host as well. And you can see we have some people here at the Ginger Elliott Conference Center, and we have one person zooming in from home. And I want to make a couple announcements before we start a story. First of all, April 18th is our 17th annual spring concert. And April 18th from 2 to 4. And I finished the web page. You can go on our website and click on the thing that says click here to get more information. And it will show everybody who's telling a story. We may add one more person, but there's 7 right now. And the next week in the same place is the Southern California Story Swap Festival. And it's being hosted by South Coast Storytelling Guild. And so we got back to back 2 Saturdays in a row of storytelling events at the Friends meeting on Harrison in Claremont. So I just wanted to get those announcements out of the way. And I'm actually going to pause the recording and then come back. Who wants to tell the story now?
I knew he was right for this one.
Okay, Ron. And I'm trying to think, he seemed kind of dark, but I don't know where you stand. Wherever.
2 weeks ago at the Southfield Storytelling Guild, I was talking about the stories that I tell at St. Patrick's Day. And Christine, who's doing a lot for the group these days, said, "How did you ever get your accent?" I had never told anybody how this came about. I have carried into different storytelling groups over the years the book, The Way of the Storyteller by Miss Sawyer. But the reason I came by that book is that I had learned 6 stories for a class the semester before, still use 4 of them. And we were coming up on St. Patrick's Day, and I went into the public library and I said, I've been trying to learn story, working on storytelling, and I really was wondering if you had anything on it. And the librarian said, borrow this book, which I want to copy, The Way of the Storyteller. It's the best book on storytelling that was ever written. I should tell you that May Argonaut, anyway, whatever her last name was the children's librarian and head librarian at Riverside Library, all of my life, all of my childhood. And we were frequent visitors. Anyway, so I got the book, I used it, picked up some of the tips. And when I came to turn the book back in, I said, this is wonderful. I said, well, you know, Bruce Sawyer has a recording. Yeah, let's go over to the media center and you get this long play record. And I think there might be a story on there that meets the need you were looking for. And so I listened to the peddler of oral dream, in the voice of Bruce Sawyer, one of the greatest storytellers in all of Great Britain's history. And still, 50 years later, this story resonates with me. Long, long ago in Northern Ireland, there lived a peddler, a fine man and an honest, decent man. He lived at the crossroads between the great King's Highway that led off to the teeming city of Dublin and the little track that led up into the hills to the village of Balogary. And because that's where he lived, they called him the peddler of Balogary. But when I say he lived there in a bit of a shack, I doubt you'd be taking my meaning. Where you see, if he stood in the middle of his little shack, he could reach way forward and open the front door of his cabin. Or taking a step back, could open the back door. Or leaning way over to the left, he could take the kettle off the shelf and place it on. Now behind his little bell, there was a garden. And at the back of that, a cherry tree. Many, many years. And every year, he would plant the things that a man could grow in that part of the world. Oh, he might plant carrots or sorghum, yeah, all sorts of things, potatoes and carrots and turnips. And that was a good thing. But every year, as his crops began to ripen, the rabbits would come in and they'd nibble a little here and they'd nibble a little over there. And pretty soon there weren't nothing in his garden worth much of anything. And his neighbors would say, "Peddler, you're a fool, man. Fence them out, shoot the rabbits." And he'd just say, "Oh, I can't do that. The beasts of the field are my friends." And I get by. Each fall, when the cherries in his cherry tree began to ripen, the birds would flock in from everywhere. And they'd peck a few here and peck a few there, so not a one of them was fit for man or beast. Hey, and again, the neighbors would say, "Peddler, shoot the birds, fence them out. They're eating all your cherries." I thought they do. But I say to your neighbor, they play more sweetly for me and my cherry tree than anywhere else in all of Ireland. And I get by. Now, of course, most days of the year, say when storms were blowing, the peddler would set off to belong to Reen or some other small village, carrying his pack with the things he had to sell. Anything that a man could carry that people couldn't easily make or grow for themselves. Bobbins of thread and needles, fine scissors and knives, packets of spice, and similar such luxuries. It often happened, that they'd spread his wares somewhere, and a young lass would come by, and she'd look down at his wares and see a beautiful silken scarf. And she'd look at it and think, if I had that fine scarf on my hair, it'd be me the boys would be dancing with, and the other girls, envious they'd be. And she'd say, "Peddler, what do you want for that fine scarf of yours?" And the peddler would think back to where he bought it and what he paid for it. And he'd say, "We must make that at least a crown." I haven't had such a sum of money on one day in all my life. And she'd make her walk away. And the peddler would say, Lassie, come back. Let's see what we can be doing. It looked far finer in your beautiful hair than it ever has in my dusty pack." And he'd sell it for whatever the girl had or could afford to pay, even though it were less than what he paid for it himself. Where it might happen that a strong, brawny young lad would walk by, and he'd see in his wares a beautiful pearl-handled clasp knife, and he'd think to himself, "If I had that fine knife, I could whistle myself up a whole bunch of useful things." And the other lads, yeah. And so he'd say to him, "Peddler, what would you like for that fine knife of yours?" And again, the peddler would think back to where he'd bought it and how long he'd carried it. And he'd say, "Well, we best make that at least a crown." That's months worth of work for me. I can't possibly. And he needs to go away. And again, this peddler would sell the knife to the young man for whatever it is he had or could afford to be paid, even though it were less than what he paid for himself. Now, neighbors and friends, it's all very well and nice to be a kind and generous man. But if year by year you make a habit of selling things for less than you paid them yourself, year by year you shall have less and less to sell. And finally, one winter's day, it had happened. Left in his pack, there was nothing. What's more, since his garden had produced nothing, he had very little of anything to eat. And he looked out at a sky that had flowing clouds from the north and thought, well, the weather's a bit frightening, and I've really no place to go this day. I think I'll just stay here all day. And so he did. walking back and forth in his little bit of a cabin, hey, listening to the growing wind, hey, with nothing to eat and not the water. That night, as he was lying in his bed, seemingly asleep, he thought, strange thing. The back door of his little cabin opened up all of itself. And the room was filled with a shimmering green light. And who should walk in but St. Patrick of Ireland himself, all dressed in Highland green and looking mighty thin for a man who had been dead 300 years. He looked at him and said, Pedlar, I belong therein. Take the road to Dublin town and stand upon a bridge, for there you'll hear what's meant for thee. And the peddler sat up in bed and looked about, but the room was cold and dark, and the door was latched as always. And he thought, what would St. Patrick want with the likes of me? And he went back to sleep. When he awoke the next morning, the first thing he noticed is that he was rather hungry. And the second was that strong wind was blowing outside his door. And he looked out at a world with racing clouds and thought, even in better times, I might not have gone out in weather like this. I shall stay here again today. And so he did, listening as the storm grew and stronger, walking back and forth with nothing to eat. That night, as he lay in his bed, tossing and turning and seemingly asleep, a strange thing happened. The front door was shut, opened all of itself. And the room was built with such a bright silvery light that he thought the moon had come down for a visit. And in strode St. Patrick of Ireland again, looking rather stern. Pedlar, belong therein, I speak to thee again. Take the road to Dublin town and stand upon the bridge, for there you'll hear what's meant for thee. And the peddler sat up and looked about, but the room was cold and dark, and the door was closed as always. And he thought, delirious, that's what it is. Delirious and cold and hungry. Oh, what's become of me? When he woke the next morning, the first thing he noticed is that he was powerfully hungry. And the next, was that a powerful storm had blown in from the north. He looked out on a world with sleet and hail, and blowing winds, and thought, no one can go out in weather like this. I must stay here again today. And so he did, walking back and forth and watching out the door sometimes, with nothing to eat and only water to drink. And that night, just after full dark, and before he could even be thinking about going to sleep, both the doors of his little shack opened up, and a bright golden light entered as if he were standing in the sunlight, and in strode St. Patrick in golden armor. He looked at him and said, Pedlar, as bogged him in. You commanded! Take the road to Dublin town and stand upon the bridge, for there you'll hear what's meant for thee. And of course, the room was cold and dark. But this time, Pedlar doubted not. He'd seen and heard. He picked up his empty pack, threw his cloak around his shoulders, put his hat on, headed out. Cold, stormy night. Now, I don't know how an old man who not eaten in 3 days could possibly have walked all the way from Ballaghaderreen to Dublin on a stormy winter's night. But the next morning dawned clear and bright, and found him standing right in the middle of the great stone bridge that led in the city of Dublin. And there he stood all day long, looking from face to face. But while he heard more conversations that he knew about and more people that he never knew existed on the earth, nothing seemed to be meant for a peddler. As the son began to sink, he thought, well, old man, you're too old and cold and hungry and tired. Why don't you just go on into Dublin and lay down in an alley, maybe find a way home in the morning. And so he walked the rest of the way across the bridge. But when his foot touched the brisk cobbles down the Dublin, hey, you man, I can touch. It was the innkeeper who had the fine hotel at the head of the bridge. I've seen you standing in the middle of the bridge all day. But you placed no wares before you, besides which the market day isn't until Wednesday, and it's 3 blocks over on the left. Hey, why are you doing what you're doing? It is a long and sad story, said the peddler. And the man smiled and said, a story, is it? Come inside and tell me your tale, and if I like it, I'll give you your supper and a bed for the night. It looks as if you could be used in both. And so the peddler went inside and told this tale, just as I've been telling it to you. But no sooner had the blessed words of St. Patrick of Ireland come out of his mouth when the innkeeper said, stop! Do I like the kind of fool to be listening to tales of that sort? Why, listen what happened to me. I was in my bedchamber, dreaming of the day's prophets, when St. Patrick came in to visit me, and he said, hey, innkeeper, take the road to Belognerin. Hey, for there at the crossroad is a cherry tree, and beneath it is a treasure. But I suppose you've earned your bed and supper. And he went to get food. The peddler simply stood up, picked up his backpack, put his cloak around his shoulders, put his hat on his head, and headed out. Now, I can't be telling you how an old man who not eaten now in 4 days could possibly have walked all the way from Dublin town to Belognerin on a cold winter's night. But I suspect he did it by simply putting one foot ahead of the other and refusing to give up. Nonetheless, as dawn broke, he was standing in front of his own cherry tree, and leaning against it was a mattock he'd never seen before. And he picked it up, and he struck the ground, and a cave opened up. It couldn't have been there before. The tree would have blown over a dozen times in that 100 years. But in it was a small chest, which he broke open. And indeed, it was treasure. Spanish treasure it was. Gold doubloon, pieces of eight, a fortune to last many a life. Now, I don't know all the good things he did with his newfound wealth, but this we know for sure. He had his little shack taken down, and at the crossroad, he had a chapel built, a chapel in honor of St. Patrick's. And when he'd gone on to his long reward, the grateful townfolk put a plaque and a statue outside that chapel. And that chapel stood in Northern Ireland until the early days of World War I, when it was accidentally bombed. It stood for centuries. And who's that much of a story? It's the absolute truth.
Thank you, Ron. I never tire of hearing that story. It's a great story. And perfect time to tell it. Tomorrow is St. Patrick's Day.
Which is why I'm going to Barbara's school to tell tales now.
Okay. Now, Barbara said she had a story to tell. Are you still there, Barbara? She'll be back. Anybody else here have a story to tell? There she is. Do you want to tell your story now? You're muted. You'll have to unmute yourself. And I'm going to move this.
Okay.
Okay, go for it.
Okay. There was a man and his son who lived in Northern Ireland. The two men were alone together. The mother had died a long time ago. Now they had a few sheep on the hills. They had a cow in the barn. They had some chickens in the yard. And they got along well together. Those two men did a fine job. The Da, he was responsible for the house and the yard. And the young man, he roamed the hillside, looking after his black-faced sheep. and there never was a bad word between the two of them. Now, I could say that perhaps it would be honest to say that the house could be a little neater, but the old man, he could fry up some great soda bread on that griddle, and there was always butter in the churn, and it was a good life. There never was a bad word between the two of them. That is until the young man put his hat on a saucy young lady in the parish nearby. And within 1 month, he was home with his brand new bride. Now, lest you think that she's the one that caused trouble between her two men, not a bit of it, not at all. Everything was even better with her. They had currant scones on Sunday. They had lamb roast on Thursday. Life was good. And wouldn't it be nice to say, 9.5 months later, a little bairn was brought into that household. Now that's when things went bad. The young man, he must have felt the weight of fatherhood on his shoulders, because suddenly he was complaining. He went from a happy-go-lucky young man loving life to somebody who complains about everything. Did he take it out on the new little bairn? No. Did he take it out on his wife? No. He turned on his own da. Oh, and it was heartrending for the wife as well. He'd been nothing but goodness to them, for sure. But when they sat by the fire in the late of the evening, the young man would say, "Dad, don't spit in the fire. You'll teach our son bad manners." Or when they're eating at the table, he'd say, "What are you, a pig at a trough? You're making such snuffling sounds. It's horrible." Well, the poor dog just tried to make himself smaller and smaller, as small as he could, to stay out of their way. And at night, even when it was cold, there he was, trying to stay away from that warm peat fire by the hearth, trying to stay out of his son's way. But there came a night when the son said, "That's it, Daw. We don't have enough food for all of us. You'll have to go to the poorhouse tomorrow." Well, the wife was startled and tried to complain, but he immediately yelled, "It's a decision and it's final." Well, she shrank back. And then the young man said, "Do you remember that fine, fine blanket that you brought into our household when we were first married? You wove it yourself. Let's get that down and we'll send Dad off to the poorhouse wrapped in the blanket for warmth." Well, she went and got the blanket. She unfolded it and unfolded it and unfolded it. Because back then, when you wove a blanket, you went ahead and made it double the size of your bed so that you could fold it back over you and you'd have 2 layers. Well, when the young man saw how beautiful that big blanket was, oh, he said, "Oh, that's too good a blanket to send him off with. Cut it in half, Mary," for that was her name. "Cut it in half and we'll just send him with half of it." Well, that's when she put her foot down. "No, I'm not cutting my blanket in half." But then the young man heard that authority in her voice and didn't complain. Over in the corner, though, by the hearth where the little bairn was in his wee cradle, came a piping little voice. "Oh, no, Ma, do cut it in half. And remind me where you fold it and put it away so that when I put my dad in the poorhouse, I'll know where to find it to send it off with him." Well, don't you know, the young man said, "Mary, make us some tea and we'll sit by the fire together." And that's the end of the tale. Now, some of you may have in your own household some adults who don't get along very well with each other, but think how much worse it could be if you didn't have each other. That's the story. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara. Will, did you want to try a story? No? could tell a story, I suppose. Didn't really prepare one, but I can tell one I haven't told for a while for practice.
You're telling obviously a spring thing, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not going to practice that here. That one special. Okay. Let's see. I'm going to tell an English folk tale called Tops or Bottoms. Long time ago, there was a farmer in England that lived in an old farmhouse that had been in the family for generation after generation after generation. And this farmhouse sat in the middle of the farm, and it was surrounded by the fields. In the north field, the farmer grew wheat. In the east field, the farmer grew alfalfa to feed to his horses and cows. In the south field, the farmer grew a variety of crops, both for himself and to take to market. He grew carrots and beets and peas and beans. But in the west field, the farmer didn't plant anything at all. So the reason he didn't plant anything in the west field is because his father told him not to do it. He remembered the day his father answered the question of why he wasn't planting the west field, and all he said was, listen, son, don't ever plant anything in that west field. You'll never get anything out of it. It's a complete waste of time. And so the farmer never planted anything in the west field, but it bothered him because that soil in the west field was really rich and fertile. And sometimes he'd go out and he, with a shovel and dig a little, and he saw, oh, this rich, loamy soil. And he'd think of all the wonderful things he could grow in that field. And finally, one year, he had, after he had finished plowing and sowing the north field, the east field, and the south field, he went out to the west field. And he said, tomorrow morning, I'm going to plow and sow this field. I'm not getting anything from it as it is. Surely I can get a crop. And so the next morning he got up bright and early, just as the sun was coming. And he took the horse and plow out to that west field. And just as he was about ready to put the plow in the ground to begin plowing it, he announced to the whole world, I'm going to plow this field and sow some seed. And as soon as that plow went into the ground, out of the ground came a mean, ugly goblin with green, bumpy skin and long yellow teeth. And he said, fine, and I will take the crop, I will. Well, the farmer was startled. No wonder his father said not to plant anything. This field is haunted by a goblin. But still, he thought, I really want to plant something here. And he thought, maybe I can outsmart this guy. And so he said, well, if you want something from this field, why don't you plant it yourself and harvest it yourself? Nah, I could never do that, said the goblin. Too much work. Oh, said the farmer, well, I have an idea. How about if I plow and sow this field with seed, and we will split the crop, half for you and half for me. Half for you and half for me? Yes, farmer, said the farmer, and I will do all the work. Half for you, half for me, you do all the work. That sounds fair enough. Good, said the farmer. Which half do you want? Do you want the top half or the bottom half? Now, the goblin was surprised at this question, and he thought, oh, this is fertile soil. And he took his clawed foot and he dug into that fertile soil. And he thought of all the things that grow underground: carrots and beets and potatoes. And he said, I'll take the bottom half. Fair enough, said the farmer. You get the bottom half, I get the top half. And with that, the goblin disappeared in a little puff of smoke. So the farmer proceeded to plow that field. And he planted it with corn seed. And what a beautiful crop of corn it turned out to be. Well, come harvest time, when the farmer was ready to harvest that corn, he went to the barn, he got his horse and a big cart to put the ears of corn in, and he went out to that west field, and poof, out came the goblin. I've come for my half of the crop. Fair enough, said the farmer. You get the bottom half, I get the top half. And so the farmer proceeded to harvest all those beautiful ears of corn and put them into his cart and left the useless stubble and roots for the goblin. Oh, he was mad, and he jumped up and down and jumped up and down, poof, disappeared in a puff of smoke. So the farmer proceeded to harvest the whole field. He kept some for himself, and he took the rest to market, and it was excellent corn. He got a good price, and he was really happy. Well, the next year, in the spring, after he had plowed and sown the north field, the east field, and the south field, he went to that west field early in the morning with the horse and plow. And as he began to plow, poof, out of the ground came the goblin. You may have fooled me once, but you're not going to fool me again. This time, I get the top half. Fair enough, said the farmer. You get the top half, I get the bottom half. I'll be back at harvest time. And poof, the goblin disappeared. So the farmer proceeded to plow that west field, and he sowed it with carrot seed. And what a fine crop of carrots it turned out to be. Well, come harvest time, the farmer went out to that field with his horse and cart, and the goblin appeared and said, I've come for my half. And the farmer said, fair enough. You get the top half, I get the bottom half. And so he would reach down, he'd pull off the tops of the carrots, throw it to the goblin, and put the golden carrots into his cart. Oh, that goblin was mad. He jumped up and down, poof. He disappeared in a puff of smoke. Well, the farmer proceeded to harvest all those carrots. He kept some for himself. He took the rest to market, got a good price because that soil was fertile. It produced wonderful crops. And so then the next year, in the spring, after the farmer had plowed and sowed the north field, the east field, and the south field, he went out early in the morning with his horse and plow to the west field. And as soon as that plow went in, out of the ground came the goblin. You may have fooled me once. You may have fooled me twice, but you're not going to fool me again. This time, I choose the crop. Fair enough, said the farmer. And, said the goblin, I choose wheat. Fair enough, said the farmer. And, said the goblin, we're going to have a mowing contest. You mow one half the field, I mow the other half. Whoever finishes their half first gets the whole crop. Now, the farmer did not like this deal. He figured that the goblin wouldn't propose having a mowing contest unless he thought he could win. And he didn't like the idea of doing a lot of work and getting nothing out of it. But what was he going to do? This magical creature is pretty scary looking. So he said, fair enough. And then the goblin said, I'll be back at harvest time. And poof, he disappeared. So the farmer plowed and sowed that field with wheat. And what a fine crop of wheat it turned out to be. And as it was growing, the farmer decided he needed to practice his mowing skills. So he went into the barn, he took the scythe, and he sharpened it real sharp. He went out to that east field where the alfalfa was growing, and he decided he would practice mowing the alfalfa and work on his technique. But the first swipe with the scythe, he hit a rock that was sticking up, and it dented it. The farmer said, oh, drat, now I got to go back and sharpen it again. And he went stomping back to the barn, and he started sharpening. Then he got an idea. He put the scythe back up on the wall. He got on his horse and he rode into town and he went to visit the blacksmith. Now, the blacksmith was pounding a red hot horseshoe into shape when the farmer came in, and the blacksmith stopped and, "What can I do for you, sir?" And the farmer said, "I would like you to make me 100 thin iron rods. Can you do that?" "Well, sure," said the blacksmith. "But what are you going to do with 100 thin iron rods?" "Oh," said the farmer, "I think I'm going to plant them." And so he did. And so come harvest time, when the farmer went out to that field with his cart and his horse and his scythe, the goblin was already there and he had a beautiful looking scythe. And so the goblin went to one side, farmer went to the other side, and they were going to mow towards the center to see who finished first. And the farmer started working away at that wheat, and he stopped because he heard something. On the other side of the field, the goblin was yelling, "Drat, toughest wheat I've ever mowed in my life." Because you see, mowing wheat is one thing, but mowing iron rods that the farmer had carefully placed here and there so thin that he couldn't see them, that's quite another. And soon his scythe was so dull it probably couldn't cut butter. Now, there is a custom in mowing contests that says that the two contestants can agree on a sharpening time where they would stop and both sharpen their tools. And so the goblin called out, "Hey, farmer, when's sharpen time?" And the farmer yelled back, "Oh, about noon, I guess." "Noon," said the goblin. "I lost already." He jumped up and down and he threw that scythe on the ground, and poof, he disappeared in a puff of smoke, never to come back again. And so the farmer mowed his side of the field. And then he went to the goblin side of the field, removed the remaining iron rods, and mowed that one, loaded it into the cart, and smiled and said, "Fair enough. Top survives an English folk tale." Well, by the way, that is the very first story I performed to a paying audience.
I've heard you tell it before years ago.
Yeah.
I've heard that before. It took me a couple minutes and you were into it.
Yeah.
Heard you tell it. That's a great story.
Yeah. So I told that in 2000 at my very first Celebration concert that I participated in. It's 23 years ago, almost 23 years. And it's a great story.
Oh, it's an awesome story.
And that is one of the few stories I do not have to practice.
I was going to ask you that. You say you remember it? You just can tell.
I didn't know what I was going to tell tonight.
Wow.
But you see, I've told that story so many times. Back in the day when we participated in the Claremont College's International Festival, where we had a storytelling booth, I would tell that story a couple times. And, during the day, I'd have different groups of kids come. And shoot, how many years did we do that, Ron?
I don't know, several anyway.
Yeah.
And I wish they were still doing that.
I know, that was fun. Okay, well, we had some good stories tonight.
Yep.
Thank you all for coming. And I have flyers.
I will post it.
And I'm thinking maybe I should get a better picture of me. And maybe I was having trouble with my color printer. So I'll give you a better copy.
Or just send the thing, or send the.
Did you get one?
I can print something out.
I can send you the file.
Yeah.
Or I can post the flyer on the website. You can download.
Well, I can spread them around.
Yeah, okay. All right. Well, thank you all for coming. And we will have our next story swap before the spring concert. And Ron Evans, check with your wife. And if you are so inclined, we'd love to have you join us.
I will do that and.
See if you get a hall pass.
All right.
Do I know Stephanie Towns?
Yes, you do. You know.
John, did you have an introduction? I don't know who all is there.
What's that?
Did you have an introduction from everybody? I don't know who all is sitting in the audience.
Oh, no, we didn't. So Ron Evans was there. You heard his story.
I heard that.
Glenn was here.
Long time no speak.
Hi, Glenn. Glad
And
you're there.
Bella,
Hi, glad you're there.
and Ron Chick and Chris.
Ron and Chris. Okay, Ron, I'll be there tomorrow up at the school by 8:30.
I'll be there.
Okay, great.
All right, I'm going to end the recording.
Thank you so much. It's a great help